talked to 4 players on Monday. It sounds like we're going to have an opportunity to talk to a lot of guys this week. Hopefully a couple assistant coaches in there, but they trotted out QB1 on the first day that we were able to speak to Michigan players. And again, I think we've heard Jim Harbaugh speak a few times this offseason on how, JJ has kind of lost the baby fat, and, he looks, more like a junior than, the fresh-faced kid that arrived at the program a couple of years ago. But this is the first time I had seen him in a while, and you could definitely see that. You could see it in his jaw. He put on some good weight this offseason, and just a guy who's super comfortable in himself, and it looks like he's taken at least that physical step forward. But there was a lot to kind of sift through there we spoke to him for about 15 minutes, and, chief among it was, he had said this, Zach Zinter had later confirmed it. First couple of days of camp, they are, as of today, I believe this is day 4 or day 5, Michigan's been throwing the ball a lot more. And there's been a lot of talk this offseason about, some more balance and, getting the passing game more involved in this offense. And obviously with that comes the hype that JJ McCarthy is a potential first-round guy next year. But, so far it's not, there's always these types of talking points too. You use camp to get reps on things that you want to get better at. And, it's clear what the emphasis has been so far. These guys have been pass blocking a lot, these guys on the offensive line, which means the pass rushers have been getting a lot of work in. JJ McCarthy and the wide receivers are getting a lot of work in. But we'll start at this point there. I mean, your thoughts about the idea that, they're taking this seriously, and this is a team that does want to throw the ball more.
Yeah, part of it, I don't worry about him when it comes to that. I worry about the receivers and who are the guys that are going to open and who's going to be receiver number 1. And is there going to be a third guy emerging? We've heard great things about Tyler Morris since the spring. Looks like JJ's listening to me talk. But he mentioned him as well today, and those guys go way back. Obviously, they played in high school together. But Tyler Morris was my pick in the magazine for breakout offensive player of the year. I think everybody else had Colston Loveland. And, the only reason I didn't go with Colston was because he kind of broke out last year, I thought, as that guy. Is he going to take it to another level, 500, 600 yards? I think you could certainly make a case for him in that respect. And but I think A.J. Barner, too, is a guy that's not getting enough pubs. So this could be one of those years where the tight ends are a huge focus of the passing offense. And then Cornelius Johnson, solid. Roman Wilson, is he going to be a deeper threat? We're hearing that. We're hearing that there are going to be more opportunities for him. But as J.J. McCarthy said, there are more 7-on-7 things going on right now because it is a no pad or a limited pad practice. So, and I like that. You know what? But he's been working with these guys all summer too. So this is not just something that they said, okay, let's just start throwing. You know what? He's one of those quarterbacks that goes and gets his guys and says, let's go throw. So I think he's going to have a big year. How many yards will he throw for? Everybody's like, oh, he's got to be over 3,000 yards. Well, it kind of depends on what happens in those first few games of the year. And when you've got one quarterback like that, and if you've got blowouts going, man, then you're going to get that quick hook out, man, and get somebody else in there. So protect this guy for the playoffs and for the Ohio State game. But regardless, I think he's going to have a great year.
Yeah, so they've been in thud so far, but that still means that there's hitting going on at the line of scrimmage. And it's not just the pass game on offense getting more work, as AB, you mentioned, it's the pass rush too. And that's what kind of excited me a little bit more about what Zach Zinter was talking about with Chris Jenkins, who he called him Chris Jenks. And secondly, he called him an elite pass rusher. And, it's a guy pumping up his teammate. I get that, but he had a real look on his face when he was asked, I think Angelique Shangelis from the Detroit News asked him, who's getting the better of who in that matchup? And he said, you usually expect that guy to say, he's going to get the better of the guy on the other side of the ball. But he said, man, it's a battle right now. He's working off the rust. And Chris Jenkins is really tough to deal with right now during practice. J.J. McCarthy said that, they're obviously not hitting him, but they're getting in his face and they're getting to him. So, the pass rush excites me. We talk about this team and, we've talked about this team since January. It's, what can take this group over the hump? What gets them from Big Ten champion, college football playoff semifinalist to national champion? And when you look at the pass rush on defense, I think that's the number one thing. And probably on offense, it's being able to run the ball, as effectively as you had, the last 2 seasons, but also take that next step, second year starting quarterback. And it seems like they're on their way to making sure they're going to be in position to do that.
I want to camp out in the Tyler Morris discussion really fast. Obviously, those guys have been very close, dating back to when they were playing in 7-on-7 together back in the 8th grade, or one of them was in the 8th grade. I think they're a year apart.
Mhm.
But the quote from JJ on Tyler Morris today was, Tyler Morris, he's going to make a big name for himself this year. I've had that connection built since my sophomore year in high school. He's going to do great things. Tyler Morris is a guy that, I know when it comes to the sophomore wide receivers, everyone has kind of fallen in love with Darius Clemens. And again, this isn't Darius Clemens shade, but because he has, all the traits. He's 6'3", he's long, he's fast. But I think when you look at these two guys, to me, given what we know about Roman, what we know about Cornelius Johnson, I think it's pretty clear to me right now that Tyler Morris is their number 3 wide receiver. And there might be a bit of separation between him and, options 4 and 5.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't think Peyton O'Leary is really a slot receiver. He's a bigger guy. So, but I do think he's going to play some. I don't think there's any question about it. They keep talking about him, and he had that big spring game. That was not the anomaly. He had a great spring. So we'll see how much. But you know what? Tyler Morris, to me, when I was talking to Ron Bellamy this spring, actually it was May or closer to June even, and Michigan's receivers coach, and he was talking about Tyler Morris, and he said, he's got that number 8 on there, and he said, I'm looking at Jim Harbaugh, and it's like we're watching Ronnie Bell here again. It's unbelievable. And they were kind of chuckling at with the plays that he was making, and it's clear now that he's back to full health. Sometimes it takes a guy's a year to get that confidence back when they have a significant knee injury, which he did. And now here he is, and I think you're going to see a big year from this kid. So, like everything about him, I don't think he likes the spotlight that much. We've talked to him a few times, even on the road this spring, and I don't think he relishes it. And I like that in a kid like that. I think he just wants to go to work and do what he's supposed to do. So, watch for a big year from him. When I say big year, kind of a breakout season, maybe 300 yards or so, I think would be a breakout season for him. And but they need some of these receivers to step up, fellas, and I think he's certainly a prime candidate.
Yeah, I agree. And the Ronnie Bell thing, I mean, that's real. If you look at his Instagram, he posted a sequence of 4 photos wearing the number 8. Just even the way he's like in the air and coming down with the ball, he looks just like Ronnie Bell in that number 8. And they don't need him to be Ronnie Bell, lead this team in receiving. But like you said, a few hundred yards, that would go a long way, considering that you need some depth to stand out there. So also, if we're going to compare Tyler Morris and Darius Clemens, I would go with Morris having a bigger season just because of his role. I think he's more of a slot receiver. And I think you can move Roman Wilson back outside like he was in 2021. Cornelius Johnson on the other side, rotate some of the other guys in. But Tyler Morris he just feels like he's going to be one of those steady guys for the next 3 years. Like this is going to be the start of the next 3 years for him. And there's the picture there. I just sent it to Megan, our producer, and she already has it on the screen. So that looks like Ronnie Bell to me.
Right? That's crazy.
A touchdown in practice. So, I like Tyler Morris. I picked him early on in the offseason to be a breakout type of guy. I wouldn't necessarily sleep, though, yet on Darius Clemens. I think there's a chance with his physical ability and with the way that he works. Roman Wilson was talking about it earlier in the offseason, how Roman doesn't go home much. He's from Hawaii. Darius Clemens from the West Coast too, and those two at times are 2 of the only guys in the weight room getting after it. So I respect that about him, and I think we could see either guy break out. But I'm really excited to watch Tyler Morris.
Yeah, I think it's important too when it comes to the Clemens and Morris. It's not even a debate or really a battle because they're 2 different receivers of 2 very different things. Clemens or Morris is going to be the guy. Obviously, like a slot guy. He's a guy that runs crisp routes. I mean, he's someone that is going to move the chains on a 3rd down or one of those key situations. There's just an easier path to him having that role right now. Whereas, Clemens is a guy who, Cornelius Johnson is there and Roman Wilson is still there. And if he's going to get on the field, he's going to earn it, which is exactly the way you'd want it too. So, that isn't to say there's only room for 3 or 3 wide receivers in this offense. I mean, there's the more the merrier, honestly, if they're serious about being more balanced and throwing the ball around more. But some early continued Tyler Morris hype as we head into this is the meat and potatoes now. I mean, that first week, it's like syllabus week in college or high school. Like you said, they've been doing the thud periods. I'd imagine things get cranked up a little bit this week with, really, 3 weeks of camp, and then they go right into game week. So it's go time for those guys. I want to switch over to the defensive side of the ball. We also talked to Jalen Harrell and Michael Barrett today. Something I found interesting when we spoke to Michael Barrett again. This is now his 6th fall camp in a Michigan uniform, which is crazy to think about. There was another reporter who had brought this up, and I hadn't even thought of this yet. But he was recruited in at Michigan for Chris Partridge's first go round with the program. So 5 years later, 6 years later, whatever it is, those two are back together. And, I think for him, when you're a 6th-year guy, it's a different situation. But, last year, guys like Jake Moody and Brad Robbins, you just kind of have your routine, and there's not, because you're so entrenched, there's not really a whole lot of pressure on you or things like that. But, Mike Barrett's in a room now where Junior Colson is healthy. Ernest Hausman is transferred in and is, making an impact already. It's not a typical scenario for a guy that came back for a 5th or a 6th year where, he's getting pushed by those guys in there. So, but linebacker depth is kind of on my mind today, fellas. And, given what we've seen from how they've built this room over the last few years, it's as deep as it's been. It's as athletic as it's been. And Mike Barrett, there's a chance his role gets pared back a little bit, but it's going to mean good things for everyone else if there are a lot of guys that can see and hit the field. Yeah,
it's positive, and Jimmy Rolder's put on some good weight, and he's going to be in there as well. But, Mike Barrett, he doesn't have a whole lot of buds left on this team, man. I mean, it's like all the guys that he came in with are gone. And I talked to him about that when we were in Cleveland at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on their trip, and he said, I feel like the old man, and sometimes when I screw up, they say, you look old timer, you know what, you need to pick it up or whatever, and go get your walker or whatever. But he said they come after him a little bit, but he's a leader, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he were a captain. He made big plays in some of the biggest games of his career. You look at the last 2 Ohio State games, and, people talk about him being inconsistent and so on and so forth. And 2 things about that. Number one, he played quarterback in high school, came here as a Viper. He went and, and then he played linebacker and everything else. And people were wondering, is he big enough to play inside? And he's made some huge plays. So, but a great kid, great guy, and love him. So, number 2, people respect him. His teammates respect him. You can tell. And those are the guys that help you when it comes to leadership. There are so many guys like him on this team that the kids can point to and say, okay, you know what, follow his lead. He's been through it all. So, like this guy, like the linebacker depth, I think it's going to give Junior Colson a little bit more of a rest than he had last year, and he talked about that quite a bit. But I think Ernest Hausman is a rising star as well, fellas, and there are going to be times that they're going to have him on the field. There is talent all over this defense, so much athleticism. If you look at Josiah Stewart, we heard about him again this weekend from one of our insiders, and then sure enough, today J.J. McCarthy says he's one of the guys getting to me the most. So there's talent everywhere. I think it's going to be a fun front 7 to cover.
Yeah, and on Josiah Stewart too, Jalen Harrell said he's not too small. He did laugh and said he is smaller than the rest of us in the edge room, but he will get up underneath you and absolutely light up an offensive tackle, get around him, and get to the quarterback. So I think he's going to be a real weapon that, yeah, he may not start these games, but he's going to be important, for this defense getting to the quarterback. Linebacker depth, huge. Junior Colson was banged up, not only with a foot injury, but I think a wrist injury last year too, and he played almost every snap. So, that's going to be important to be able to spread those snaps out just a little bit, keep those guys fresh. Because as we've talked about too, I think I mentioned it last week. I mean, one of the keys of this season is not only to just stay healthy and avoid those major injuries like Blake Corum going down, but have everybody at as close to 100% at the end of the season as you possibly can. That was a pretty banged up team from Mike Morris to Blake Corum to Donovan Edwards and some other guys at the end of last year. Got to keep them fresh for the games when it matters the most. So that's going to be big. And then AB too. You mentioned some of those veterans that they're just kind of out there, being able to run their own practice to an extent. Somebody asked Zach Zinner about that with Sharon Moore on the offensive line and saying, is it any different now that he's the sole offensive coordinator? He said it is a little different that they come off to the side after, a period or whatever, and they're kind of meeting and figuring things out on themselves, on their own, and then calling him over if they need help. But, if that's the case, which it sounds like it is, this is the perfect offensive line for Sharon Moore to have his first year in this role with, because there are just so many vets over there. And they have about 10 guys Zinner said maybe they'll go with the 10 offensive lineman set and 1 running back. They got so many capable guys and so many guys that have seen so much football. So I think they're going to be just fine, and they'll be able to figure out, Sharon Moore will be able to divvy up his time perfectly.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's something where over the last few years where Sharon Moore has had more kind of put on his plate, coaching the offensive line. Then last year was the co-offensive coordinator. This year, the guy, to have such a veteran group, even with the transfers that you brought in, Drake Nugent has played a lot of football. Miles Hinton has been around for a long time. Ladarius Henderson has been around for a long time. You have 2 fifth-year guys competing at tackle spots. It kind of just makes it a plug and play. You still got to coach those guys up, and there's a lot to decide, obviously, with as many as 3 spots up for grabs. But that offensive line is, you'd think, in very good hands. We do have a $5 super sticker here from our friend Sister Sandoz. If you have a question, feel free to send it in. We will stop what we're doing to answer it. A couple things. Love Barrett. Sister Sandoz says, those who stay is a Michigan man and represents South Georgia. Saw Barrett play in high school at Lowndes. So, send in a question if you have one. But shout out for the $5 super chat here on a Monday.
What's a super sticker? I don't even know.
No clue.
I don't know.
We'll take your $5,
everyone, I guess.
Yeah, we'll take your $5, Sister Sandoz. But if you want a question in there, man, or woman, or sister, none. Then please feel free to ask. So
just call everyone man, like Dan Campbell does.
Man, we're gonna bite some kneecaps and kick some ass. So
that's right.
Yeah, something I was gonna, I guess, kind of pulling all of the press conference stuff together from earlier today. A through line of all these conversations was, how do you bounce back from a disappointing end of last year? And a few of the guys that we spoke to, and again, all that we've heard all offseason is that it's been all hands on deck. All these guys are, as physically developed as they've been in the last few years. They're as focused as they've been. You don't get the sense that anyone on the roster is too fat and happy, but those guys have basically said, and I'm paraphrasing from JJ McCarthy, but the train was rolling and they hit obviously the speed bump that they did against TCU, but they never stopped. Some new guys got on the train. A couple guys got off the train, but the train is still rolling and those guys are still focused. And I guess just the sense that you guys got from the headspace this team is in. I mean, these guys are all about their business right now.
They are. And, a few people on the message boards were concerned. They said, well, they seem, how they expect to win. And, are they too confident? And I think there was something to be said for maybe they were a little too confident for that against TCU. And some of the coaches that we spoke with even said that, they got big heads and they were kind of looking past them. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. And you know what? They've felt the disappointment 2 years in a row of losing in the semifinals. And last year definitely shouldn't have. There's no question about it. So you don't know when you're going to get an opportunity like that again. As good as this team is, fellas, it could finish 10-2. And people are saying, oh, there's no way that this team could finish 10-2. There absolutely is a way this team could finish 10-2. You get a couple bad breaks in big games, and you're 10-2, and it happens. Better teams don't always win football games. Remember Penn State and Ohio State several years ago when the block kicked at the end of the game that Ohio State had basically dominated. So stuff happens. So, but to me, the leadership, the program, it feels like the early 90s all over again, where you expected these guys to win the Big Ten and to go out there and be favored in just about every game. So, and the biggest difference is now you're going into that Ohio State game not selling hope anymore, to quote a former rival coach. You've won that thing twice, and really the pressure is on Ohio State to turn that thing around, and you can feel it. I could feel it from Ryan Day at Media Day. You know what? Looking for reasons and talking about, hey, this is what we need to do, and we learned from this, and we learned from that. Well, you got to go to Ann Arbor, and you got to win that game after you just got your butt kicked by 3 touchdowns a couple of times. So it's going to be a fun year, fellas. I'm pretty excited, and I don't think there's any question that the confidence is an all-time high.
Yeah, they should be confident. And I think it's kind of the perfect storm when you talk about, Jim Harbaugh said there's no complacency with this team. He said that last summer, in basically the same exact words, and there wasn't. I mean, they rattle off 13 wins, and we're 13-0, win 13 games for the first time in program history. So that, that proved to be true. Now you kind of had this is the best evidence Jim Harbaugh has of cultural momentum, which is what he talks about, is that the things he used to tell the guys, like, hey, last year doesn't matter, it's all about this year, our time is now. They're saying that to him now, like, that's the perfect example of what this, level of complacency is with this team. It's low, but the confidence is high at the same time, and they're using the end of the year, that game in the Fiesta Bowl, as fuel. So it's kind of the perfect storm, those two things coming together. And yeah, they feel confident. They should be. And, that's a big reason why I think they were able to go down to Columbus last year and win, is because they knew they could beat that team. They knew that they were the tougher team and the team that wouldn't fold at the end. And that's what carried them, over the finish line. So you need that confidence. You don't want to get overconfident, but you need that confidence to achieve at this level, I think, in college football.
It came up today in someone's question, that 2019 season where Michigan, I think it was the last time where the Cleveland.com poll had them as the favorite to win the Big Ten. And obviously they fall flat on their face. They go 9-3. The season was actually even more frustrating than the record would even indicate that it was, when you consider the talent level on the roster, what those expectations were. And the reason I don't worry about this group being cocky is, one, because like you guys said, we've seen them do it. But there's not an entitlement to them. I think there were guys in the earlier Harbaugh era that would, success was guaranteed to them because they came to Michigan, and, Michigan was the best and they're the most talented and yada, yada, yada. But, when you speak to these players, it's, they have an edge to them without being abrasive. And, they're very insular in taking, handling their business 1 week at a time, one practice at a time. We hear that's such an overblown cliche, but this is really, I think, this is 1 week at a time incarnate. That's the biggest thing that's led to this turnaround, is the fact that they don't listen to, for lack of a better term, the bullshit. They don't listen to the outside noise. They're not worried about what people are saying to them on Twitter or X now or Instagram, whatever it is. These guys just show up every day. They go to work and they know that nothing is owed to them. And I think last year, the TCU game was maybe a little bit of a, reversion back to, thinking that they deserved to win that game or they were the better team. You get the sense that this team has kind of learned from that. And does that mean they're going undefeated? No. Does it mean they're winning the national title? No. But, you get the sense that, for a lot of programs, there's a climb you have to make, and you have to get knocked down a few pegs. And that kind of winds up being, something that defines your story once you finally reach that mountaintop. So
and they're
I get that sense.
Yeah, they're self-policing now too. Like in the past, they roll in their eyes at some of their teammates when, one of their mothers says your main objective before this rivalry game is to not get hurt. You aren't going to win a rivalry game with guys like that when those guys are your starters. Another guy calling somebody at his position group in the NFL asking if he should opt out of the season to protect his draft status. Goodbye. Get the hell out. So you don't have any of that. And if you do have any of that, then these guys are like, okay, you need to go. You don't fit our culture anymore. But to be able to change it in a year like they did, AB and Clayton, to me was remarkable. It was one of the more remarkable things I've seen in this program in the 40 plus years that I've been watching Michigan football. And I credit Jim Harbaugh and his staff for making that happen.
It's incredible how far they've come, for sure.
Yeah, just like that.
Yeah, and they've earned it too. I mean, that's the thing. They have dug themselves completely out of this hole, which is what you were going to have to do coming out of the dark ages, so to speak. But any other final takeaways from the Monday pressers before we talk about a few more of our friends here?
Guys look great. It's unreal. They said that they've been setting all kinds of records in the weight room and stuff like that. And to me, Ben Herbert is, of course, he's not one of the unsung heroes anymore of this team because everybody knows what he does and getting these guys in shape. So Mason Graham's got a little bit of baby fat on there. I mean, that might not be the better example, but you know what? Here's the thing. He played at that, he lost, I think, 20 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. And just like that in a month in the spring when he'd gotten a little bit heavier, I have no concerns about him whatsoever, but can't wait to see Chris Jenkins, fellas. Everything that we've heard in talking to the offensive lineman, there he is right there. I think this kid's going to be an absolute animal. And I don't think he's going to be Maurice Hurst in there when it comes to pass rushing, but I think he was underrated in that respect a little bit last year. Some of the impact plays that he made in the Ohio State game, drawing a holding penalty, forcing a high throw. I think you're going to see him get to the quarterback and be rewarded for that a little bit more this year because they're going to have a hard time double teaming anybody on that line.